Hi, I'm Claire, and this is my second video for MVS Fromm. And I'm going to be reading part of a passage from Chapter 2, Humanistic Ethics in Erich Fromm's A Man for Himself. Humanistic ethics, for which good is synonymous with good for man, and bad with bad for man, proposes that in order to know what is good for man, we have to know his nature. The choice between life and death is more apparent than real. A man's real choice is that between a good life and a bad life. Now, this really made me think about how growing up, everything's determined between what is good and what is bad. And the outcome of our decisions are based upon that. Growing up, we're always told, don't do that, that's bad. Oh, good job, you're great. To see how we see the rest of the world. So this is where opinions and beliefs come into play, and I hadn't really thought about this until I started taking the class, but our opinions and beliefs were never our choice. We did not choose what family we were born into, how many siblings we had, where we were born, and our economic status. That just happened, and by the time you get to the age where you actually have the potential to make your own decisions as a young adult, those decisions you are making are not based off of your natural opinion. It's based off of what you've been taught and been raised with, which you never had the choice of in the first place. So it's really difficult to try and figure out, okay, this is what is good and this is what is bad, when you are going off of the situation you've been raised in and what you see in the media and what you see in school and from your parents and society. And since all of us are in this situation, it's up to us to determine what is good and what is bad, which is also based upon what benefits ourselves, because the aim of man is to find happiness, and no matter what your moral set is, what your actions are based off of what you think will make you happy. Not necessarily what will, but what you think will make you happy. And as I talked about man's choices more between a good life and a bad life, it's really up to you to determine, okay, I make this decision, this will be the outcome. I make this decision, this will be the outcome. So it's hard to always think about that when the purpose of life is to live. So being in Fromm really made me think about this more and more, and also brought me back to self-interest. What people teach you is good and what people teach you is bad is based off of how that will benefit themselves. So say your parents ask you to do the dishes, that's you being good, but it's also so they don't have to do it, so you are helping them, and that helps their situation more. If you do the dishes or not, that doesn't really affect how your happiness is going to be during the day. It might make you irritated, but it's good for your parents, so they're happy, and then that makes the day a little less stressful. But that action isn't based off of what your wants and needs are, but based off of what your parents' wants and needs are. And teachers do that as well. If they tell you to do an assignment, yes, it's going to help you in the long run, but at that point in time, it might not necessarily feel relevant to you. So it's interesting to try and figure out what is good and what is bad when you're also dealing with what is good and what is bad for that person leading you. So it's really important to take into account your opinions that you've been raised with, but then also try and gain an outside perspective on what those around you and those significant people in your life find good and bad. So once you get to this point in your life when you're starting to make decisions for yourself, and I know that's something I'm facing with going off to college this fall, is I'm going to have to take my opinions and beliefs that I've been raised with, but also figure out how to determine what is good and bad for me without making it selfish that you're inconsiderate of others' wants and needs. But selfishness is not necessarily a bad thing either. And it just goes back to what is good and bad for you versus what is good and bad for others. So it's really difficult to determine that, and it's something that's still a confusing concept to grasp. But making these choices is part of living, and ultimately, besides the goal of man to obtain happiness or the next goal, the next step, it's also to figure out what your own perspective on life is, despite whatever situation you've grown up in. So this concept is something I'm still learning, but it was really, really interesting to recognize the fact that I never chose the life that I ended up with. I was fortunate enough to end up in this situation, but I don't know what it would be like to be in someone else's shoes. All I can do is try and learn from them, and also gain a better understanding of other people's opinions and where they're coming from, even though I came from somewhere different. And I think that's what's going to help make the world better, is by trying to understand how somebody's opinions of what is good and what is bad can be different from something you've grown up thinking what is good and what is bad. And there's always going to be that difference between you and others, and learning to understand those differences and respect those differences, not necessarily agreeing, but respect them, is going to help make you wiser as a person and lead you in a positive direction for what your opinions are, but also being open to learning and accepting new ideas. So thank you so much, and have a great week.